Toto Wolff may have just been forced into the one fight Mercedes never wanted before the Austrian Grand Prix. Not a fight against Ferrari on track. A fight against Ferrari's evidence. Because Ferrari has reportedly pushed the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile into a technical clarification that could remove one of Mercedes' most controversial upgrades, the serrated diffuser extension on the W16. And the reason this is so explosive is not just that Mercedes could lose performance. It is that Ferrari had already been forced to remove a similar idea before the season even began. So when Ferrari saw Mercedes running its own version, Maranello did not just complain. They built a case. They forced the question into the open. And now Toto Wolff is left defending an upgrade Mercedes believed had been developed with the approval of the rule makers. Mercedes leads the championship. Ferrari is hunting. The Austrian Grand Prix is about to begin. And if this upgrade disappears now, the biggest damage may not be on the car. It may be inside the Mercedes garage. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this story has created so much anger around Mercedes, you have to look beyond the word banned. Because in Formula 1, a ban is rarely just a ban. It is not simply a mechanic removing a part, closing a toolbox, and moving on. It is weeks of design work suddenly under threat. It is factory time questioned. It is simulation data that may no longer matter in the same way. It is a driver arriving at a race weekend and wondering whether the car beneath him is still the car he expected. That is why Toto Wolff's frustration would make sense. Mercedes did not arrive at this point as a team trying to rebuild from the back. Mercedes arrived as the team everyone was chasing. The Silver Arrows had built a commanding early season position, with Kimi Antonelli and George Russell giving the team serious control of the championship picture. And when you are leading, every rival starts searching for your weakness. Ferrari found one. Or at least, Ferrari believed it had found one. The part at the center of the storm is a serrated diffuser extension. That sounds complicated, but the basic idea is simple. The diffuser sits underneath the rear of the car. It helps guide the air leaving the floor. When that air is managed well, the car can generate more grip, especially at the rear. More grip means the driver can brake later, turn with more confidence, and accelerate sooner. In Formula 1, that is gold. Now add the word serrated. It means jagged, like the edge of a saw. Those small teeth can influence how the air separates and reconnects behind the car. To a casual fan, it may look like a tiny detail. To an aerodynamicist, it can be a serious performance tool. And this is where Ferrari's evidence becomes dangerous. Ferrari had already explored a similar aerodynamic battlefield on its own SF26 during the winter. But during pre-season legality checks, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile required Ferrari to remove that diffuser specification before the season began. That detail is the key to everything. Ferrari had already been stopped. Ferrari had already paid the price. Ferrari had already been told that one version of this idea crossed the line. So when Mercedes appeared with a related serrated diffuser concept, Ferrari saw more than a clever upgrade. Ferrari saw a possible double standard. Why was Maranello forced to back away, while Mercedes appeared to move forward? That is the question that detonated the dispute. And for Toto Wolff, that question is not just annoying. It is dangerous. Because Mercedes' position has been that it develops in dialogue with the governing body. Wolff has previously made the point that Mercedes had assurances that what it was doing was according to the rules. That is not a small statement. That is Mercedes saying, we checked. We asked. We followed the process. But Ferrari's evidence pushed the argument into a different place. Ferrari was not simply saying Mercedes had cheated. The source material does not support that kind of simple accusation. The sharper argument was that the regulatory boundary had become unclear, and that Ferrari had been treated differently when working in the same general area. That is much harder to dismiss. Because Formula 1 is built on interpretation. Every team reads the same rulebook, but the fastest teams understand how to live near the edge of it. They look for spaces where the rules do not explicitly close the door. They find shapes, surfaces, and ideas that are not obvious to the public, but can be decisive on the stopwatch. That gray area is where innovation lives. But it is also where political war begins. Ferrari knew that better than anyone, because Ferrari had already been burned. The team was forced to remove its own winter diffuser idea. Then it watched Mercedes run a serrated solution later in the season. So Maranello did what top teams do when they see a rival gaining from a sensitive area. They asked for clarification. That phrase sounds calm. A formal clarification. It sounds like paperwork. It sounds like legal language. It sounds distant from the roar of engines and the pressure of a race weekend. But inside Formula 1, a clarification can hit like a hammer. Because a clarification can change what teams are allowed to run. It can shrink a gray area overnight. It can turn a clever advantage into a problem. And if it arrives just before a Grand Prix, it can force a team into emergency mode. That is why Austria matters. The Austrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring was the potential enforcement deadline. And that timing is brutal for Mercedes. Austria is short, fast, exposed. The lap is so compressed that small losses can show quickly. There are hard braking zones, traction demands, and corners where rear stability matters. If a car loses confidence at the rear, the driver feels it immediately. A tiny aerodynamic loss can become a bigger race problem. One corner becomes tire stress. Tire stress becomes strategy pressure. Strategy pressure becomes lost track position. Lost track position becomes frustration. And once frustration enters a championship fight, the pressure multiplies. This is what Ferrari may have understood. They did not need Mercedes to be destroyed by the clarification. They only needed Mercedes to be disturbed by it. Because a disturbed Mercedes is not the same as a calm Mercedes. A calm Mercedes attacks. It develops cleanly. It gives its drivers certainty. It arrives at a weekend knowing what the car is, where the lap time is, and how the tires should behave. A disturbed Mercedes has to answer extra questions. What happens if the diffuser extension comes off? What if the replacement is not ready? What if the balance changes? What if the car becomes harder to drive? What if Ferrari has just exposed the one area Mercedes was relying on more than anyone realized? That is the psychological damage. And for Toto Wolff, that may be the part that stings most. Because Wolff understands Formula One politics as well as anyone. He knows that rivals do not only fight with cars. They fight with pressure, with questions, with technical correspondence, with carefully timed challenges that force a team to split its attention. And Ferrari's move did exactly that. Mercedes now had to defend not only its lap time, but the legitimacy of one of its key aerodynamic choices. That changes the atmosphere. Reporters ask different questions. Rivals look more closely. Engineers become more careful. Drivers feel the uncertainty, even if nobody admits it openly. And the garage starts carrying a different energy. Not panic. Mercedes is too experienced for that. But tension. And tension is enough. Because Formula One is a sport of tiny margins. You do not need to break a team to hurt it. You only need to force it one step away from perfection. That is why Ferrari's evidence matters so much. It reportedly pushed the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile toward a technical clarification requiring serrated diffuser extensions to be removed, with Austria as the possible deadline. But the enforcement picture was not completely clean. Affected teams reportedly pushed back, saying replacement parts were not ready. There were also suggestions that the deadline could be postponed until the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. That uncertainty creates another problem. If the ban happens in Austria, Mercedes faces immediate disruption. If the ban is delayed, Mercedes races under a cloud, knowing the part may soon disappear. Either way, Ferrari has already achieved something important. They have made Mercedes think defensively. And that is exactly what a chasing team wants. Ferrari came into this fight with momentum. Lewis Hamilton had won in Barcelona, giving Ferrari its first victory of the season and proving that the SF26 could fight Mercedes. That win mattered emotionally. It changed the way Ferrari saw itself. Before Barcelona, Ferrari was chasing from a position of frustration. After Barcelona, Ferrari was chasing with evidence of its own speed. And then came the political strike. That combination is dangerous. A fast Ferrari is one problem. A politically aggressive Ferrari is another. But a Ferrari that is both fast and politically aggressive becomes something much more serious. It becomes a team willing to attack every weakness Mercedes has, visible or invisible. That is why Wolff's anger matters in this story. Because anger in Formula One is rarely just emotion. It is often a sign that a team believes a line has been crossed. Mercedes can accept being challenged on track. It can accept Ferrari bringing upgrades. It can accept pressure from rivals. But having a component questioned after the team believed it was operating within the rules is different. That feels personal. It feels like the ground shifting. And the hardest part for Mercedes is that the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile's position appears nuanced. The Mercedes solution had reportedly been considered compliant because its exact geometry differed from Ferrari's earlier version. In other words, this was not a simple copy and paste situation. The concepts were similar in spirit, but not identical in shape. That distinction matters. Mercedes could argue that its design was legal. Ferrari could argue that the principles still needed stricter control. The governing body was caught in the middle. And when the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile is caught in the middle, the rulebook becomes the battlefield. This is where the story becomes bigger than one diffuser. It becomes a question of fairness. If Ferrari was forced to remove a similar idea before the season, should Mercedes be allowed to race a version that lives in the same performance zone? If Mercedes received assurances, should those assurances protect the team from later restrictions? If the rules are clarified after a part is introduced, is that justice, or is it moving the goalposts? There is no simple answer. And that is exactly why the controversy is so powerful. Because both sides can claim they are defending fairness. Ferrari can say it wants consistency. Mercedes can say it followed the process. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile can say it is protecting the regulations. And fans are left watching a technical dispute turn into a political drama. But here is the part most people miss. Ferrari did not only want to stop Mercedes. Ferrari also wanted to protect its own understanding of the concept. After the initial clarification, Ferrari developed its own legal version of the serrated diffuser idea and introduced it at Monaco. That same direction became part of the larger upgrade package used at Barcelona, where Hamilton won. That is fascinating. Because Ferrari was not rejecting the concept entirely. Ferrari wanted the legal line drawn in a way that made sense for its own design path, while challenging the version Mercedes was using. That is a delicate game. Push too little, and Mercedes keeps the advantage. Push too hard, and Ferrari limits itself. Push perfectly, and the governing body tightens the area just enough to hurt your rival while leaving your own development direction alive. That is ruthless. And it is exactly the kind of maneuver that makes Formula One so different from ordinary sport. The battle is not just who drives faster. It is who understands the system better. Ferrari had suffered from the system in winter. Then it learned from the system. Then it used the system against Mercedes. That is why this moment feels like revenge through regulation. And for Wolff, that would be infuriating, because Mercedes is not being beaten only by Ferrari's speed. It is being dragged into a fight about interpretation, timing, and political pressure. A fight Mercedes must handle while protecting a championship lead. And protecting a lead is mentally different from chasing one. When you are chasing, every attack feels energizing. Every risk feels necessary. Every small gain feels like proof that the gap can close. When you are leading, every challenge feels like a threat. Every clarification feels like a possible trap. Every lost tenth feels like the beginning of a bigger story. That is where Mercedes is now. The team has points in hand, but Ferrari is trying to change the emotional direction of the season. Because championship fights are not only measured in standings. They are measured in momentum. And Ferrari is trying to create the feeling that Mercedes can be pulled back. That feeling matters. If the paddock believes Mercedes is vulnerable, the pressure increases. Other teams become bolder. Drivers ask more from their cars. Engineers search more aggressively for weaknesses. Journalists build the narrative. Fans start watching every Mercedes sector time as if it contains a secret. That is how a technical clarification becomes a season story. And Mercedes knows it has to shut that down quickly. The best way to kill the story is simple. Go fast anyway. If Mercedes removes or modifies the serrated diffuser and still performs strongly, Ferrari's political victory becomes limited. The story loses power. The paddock moves on. The message becomes clear. Mercedes was never dependent on that one part. But if Mercedes struggles, even slightly, everything changes. If rear stability looks worse, the diffuser becomes the explanation. If the tires degrade faster, the diffuser becomes the explanation. If Russell or Antonelli cannot attack the car with the same confidence, the diffuser becomes the explanation. And once one part becomes the explanation, it becomes a symbol. Ferrari wants that symbol. Mercedes fears it. Because the symbol is not just jagged carbon fiber at the rear of the car. The symbol is vulnerability. This is the real danger for Toto Wolff. Not that Mercedes suddenly becomes slow overnight. That would be too dramatic, and probably too simple. The danger is that Mercedes loses the aura of control. The aura matters. Great teams build it over time. Rivals feel it before races even start. When Mercedes looks organized, calm, and confident, the rest of the grid knows the target is hard to reach. But when Mercedes is forced into defensive explanations, the aura cracks. Just a little. And Ferrari knows that one crack can become a doorway. That is why the Austrian Grand Prix became so loaded. Ferrari was arriving with momentum from Barcelona. Mercedes was arriving with questions around its diffuser. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile had issued a clarification after Ferrari's request. And the enforcement deadline was close enough to make the pressure real.